Please subscribe to my channel. This is my sincere request to you, honey. I thought the worst part of Christmas dinner was my mother sneering at my career and calling it childish online nonsense. Then I left my laptop screen unlocked. A single number hit them like a physical blow. $14 million. The room went silent for 1 second before my brother slammed the table, demanding a transfer tonight. They think I am prey, but I have been preparing for this moment for years. My name is Brinley Perry. I am 34 years old. If you grew up in a house like mine, you learn the physics of family affection very early. It is not created or destroyed. It is simply hoarded. In the Perry household, love was a limited resource, and my older brother, Dylan, held the monopoly. I was not abused, and I was not starved. I was simply the background noise. I was the sturdy furniture that you only notice when you stub your toe on it. I was the reliable one, the boring one, the one who did not need saving and therefore did not need attention. Christmas at my mother's house in the suburbs of Milwaukee always felt like walking into a time capsule that had been slightly damaged by water. The air inside was always 10 too hot, thick with the smell of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and the faint underlying scent of stale cigarette smoke that clung to the curtains despite Mara quitting 5 years ago. The television in the corner was always blaring at a volume that made your teeth vibrate. It was tuned to the pregame show for the Packers, the commentators shouting about defensive lines and injury reports. The house was cramped. It was a small 2-bedroom ranch that felt even smaller when the extended family squeezed in. My Aunt Linda, my Uncle Rick, and 3 cousins, who all seemed to be in various stages of unemployment, were packed around the dining table that had been extended with a card table at the end. That was where I sat, the card table section, the wobbly end of the dynasty. I sat there smoothing a napkin over my lap, watching my mother. Mara was in her element. She was bustling between the kitchen and the dining room, her face flushed from the oven heat and the 2 glasses of Chardonnay she had already consumed. She carried a platter of mashed potatoes as if it were a holy relic. She placed it down right in front of Dylan. Dylan sat at the head of the table. That was his spot. He was 36, 2 years older than me. But he still had the restless energy of a teenager who owed someone money. He was wearing a Green Bay jersey that was a size too tight across the shoulders. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, the kind you get from staring at odd screens at 3:00 in the morning. But here in this room, he was the king. I watched him scoop a mountain of potatoes onto his plate. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. The noise in the room was a wall of sound. Uncle Rick was arguing about gas prices. Aunt Linda was complaining about her hip surgery. The TV screamed about a touchdown. I took a sip of water. I had brought 3 bottles of wine, expensive Pinot Noir from a vineyard I liked in Oregon. But Mara had opened a jug of sweet red blend instead because it goes down easier. My wine sat unopened on the counter. Then came the moment I had been dreading, the toast. Mara tapped her fork against her glass. The cheap crystal made a dull thudding sound. The room quieted down, though the TV kept shouting. I just want to say, Mara began, her eyes immediately misting up. She looked at Dylan, her gaze soft and adoration-filled. I am so blessed. We have had a hard year. Inflation is up. Everything costs so much. But we are all here. Family is what matters. She paused, taking a dramatic breath. And I want to give a special shout-out to my Dylan, she said, who has been working so hard looking for the right management position. I know the market is tough, honey, but your time is coming. I feel it. You are a fighter. Thanks, Mar, Dylan said, mouth full of turkey. Then Mar turned her head toward the end of the table. Her eyes changed. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a thin, pitying smile. It was the look you give a stray cat that you do not intend to feed. And Brinley, she said, the table turned to look at me. We are glad you could make it from Denver. It is a long flight. It's good to be here, Mum. I lied. So, she said, her voice raising an octave, performing for the audience. How is your little online thing going? Is that still happening? Are you still surviving? The table erupted in a ripple of polite, chuckling laughter. It was the designated joke. Brinley and her computer. Brinley and her imaginary career. I felt the heat rise up my neck, but I kept my face perfectly still. I had practiced this face in the mirror for decades. "It is going fine, Mom," I said calmly. "Work is good." "Work?" Dylan snorted. He slammed his beard down a little too hard. "She calls it work. You sit in your pajamas and type? Right. What is it again?" "Data entry. Crypto scams." "It is financial analytics, Dylan," I said, my voice steady. "I run a small fund." "A fund?" he mocked, rolling his eyes at Uncle Rick. "She runs a fund like she's on Wall Street." "Listen, Bryn, real work is when you sweat. Real work is when you build something. Sitting at a computer isn't a profession. It is a hobby." "Well," Mara interrupted, waving her hand dismissively, "as long as it pays your rent, I suppose. I just worry about you, Brinley. No benefits, no pension, no security. It is all just pixels. It is childish to rely on the internet for your livelihood. Eventually, you have to grow up and get a real job." She looked around the table for approval and found it. Aunt Linda nodded sympathetically. Uncle Rick winked at me as if to say humor her. "I am doing okay, Mom," I repeated. "Really?" Sure, Dylan said. "That is why you drive that rental car, right? Because you are rolling in it." I didn't tell him I drove a rental because I didn't want to put miles on my Range Rover, or because driving a luxury SUV into this driveway would have caused a different kind of explosion. I just nodded. "The rental is fine," I said. I swallowed the insult along with a dry piece of turkey. This was the deal. This was the price of admission. I was the good daughter, the one who didn't cause scenes, the one who absorbed the snide remarks so the holiday wouldn't be ruined. They needed me to be small so they could feel big. They needed me to be failing so their own stagnation didn't feel so sharp. The conversation drifted away from me, back to the football game and the price of heating oil. I exhaled a long, slow breath through my nose. I needed a break just for a minute. "I am going to check on dessert," I said, standing up. "Sit down, Brinley. I haven't cleared the table yet," Mara snapped. "I just need to check something in my bag," I said. "I will be right back." I walked out of the dining room and into the living room. It was technically the same space, separated only by a half wall, but the noise of the TV provided a sonic barrier. My leather laptop bag was sitting on the ugly floral sofa. My heart was hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I needed to see it. I needed to remind myself of reality. I unzipped the bag and pulled out my laptop. It was a sleek, high-performance machine, unrecognizable to them. To them, it was a toy. To me, it was the cockpit of a rocket ship. I sat on the edge of the sofa and opened the lid. I had to check the year-end reconciliation for Perry Ridge Ventures. The markets were closed for the holiday, but the futures were moving, and I had a significant position in a Singaporean fintech startup that was announcing their quarterly earnings in 3 hours. I logged in. The security layers fell away. Biometric scan, two-factor authentication, password. The dashboard loaded. Summit Harbor Analytics. The interface was dark mode, sleek charcoal, and electric blue. The numbers populated the screen in crisp white rows. It was beautiful. It was the only language that had ever made sense to me. It didn't lie. It didn't have favorites. It just was. I scrolled down to the total equity line. I took a deep breath. Seeing the number grounded me. It reminded me that their words were just noise. They were ghosts haunting a life I had already outgrown. I wasn't the girl at the card table. I was the architect of this. "Brinley," Mara's voice shrieked from the kitchen. "Are you helping or are you playing on that machine?" Panic spiked. Not the panic of a child, but the annoyance of an interrupted professional. "Coming, Mom?" I yelled back. I quickly tapped the key to put the computer to sleep. Or I thought I did. I was frustrated, moving too fast. I slapped the lid down, but not all the way. It stayed open a crack, the hinge catching on the strap of my bag. I didn't notice. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked back into the dining room. I spent the next 20 minutes clearing plates. I scraped half-eaten turkey bones into the trash. I loaded the dishwasher. I listened to Aunt Linda describe her gallbladder operation in excruciating detail. I played the part. I was the beautiful, invisible daughter. Dylan had moved from the table. I heard the heavy thud of his boots on the carpet. "Where is the remote?" Dylan yelled. "Mar, where did you put the remote?" "The game is back on." "It is in the living room, Dylan." Mara shouted from the sink. "Check the sofa." I froze. I was holding a stack of dirty dessert plates. The water was running in the sink. But suddenly, the air in the house seemed to drop to absolute zero. The sofa, my laptop. I turned around. From the kitchen doorway, I could see the back of the sofa. I saw Dylan stomp over to it. He started shoving cushions around, looking for the remote. Then he stopped. He saw the laptop. The lid was ajar. The screen had not gone to sleep. I had set the sleep timer to 30 minutes, so I could monitor tickers without logging in constantly. He reached out. "Dylan, don't." I whispered, but the sound died in my throat. He flipped the lid open. I saw his silhouette stiffen. It wasn't a casual look. His entire body went rigid like he had touched a live wire. He stood there, bent over the coffee table, staring down at the screen. The blue light from the display illuminated his face. His mouth fell open. He didn't move for 5 seconds. I took a step forward. "Dylan." He ignored me. He leaned closer to the screen, squinting as if he couldn't process the symbols he was seeing. He traced a finger across the glass, counting the commas, 1 comma, 2 commas. He stood up slowly. He looked toward the kitchen. He didn't look at me. He looked through me. His face was pale, drained of blood, his eyes wide and terrifyingly focused. "Mom," he said, his voice was trembling. "What is it, Dylan?" Mara called out, wiping her hands on a towel. "Did you find the remote?" "Mom," Dylan screamed. It was a sound I had never heard from him before. It wasn't his usual whine. It wasn't anger. It was the sound of a gold rush. It was the sound of a starving animal smelling fresh meat. "Everyone." Dylan roared, waving his arm frantically toward the living room. "Everyone come here now." Mara dropped the towel. Uncle Rick stopped mid-sentence. The urgency in Dylan's voice pulled them like a magnet. They rushed into the living room. I followed, my legs feeling like lead. Dylan was pointing at the screen. His finger was shaking. "Look," he choked out. "Look at this." Mara crowded in. Uncle Rick leaned over her shoulder. Aunt Linda put on her glasses. They looked at my childish online thing. They looked at the hubby. The dashboard of Perry Ridge Ventures was glowing in the dim living room. The total portfolio value was displayed in large, bold white font at the top center of the screen. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a statement of war. It read $14,180,2,640.41, saw $100. The silence that followed was louder than the screaming television. It was a vacuum. It sucked the oxygen out of the room. I stood in the doorway watching their backs. I saw Mara's hand cover her mouth. I saw Dylan's hands curl into fists on the edge of the table. The secret was out and the family dinner was over. The hunt had begun. To understand the silence that fell over that living room in Denver, you have to understand the noise of the house in Milwaukee. You have to understand the specific acoustic properties of a home where money is leaking out of the windows like heat in a Wisconsin winter. My father died when I was 8 years old. It was a construction accident, a beam that slipped a gear and fell 3 stories. He did not die instantly, which meant the hospital bills ate through the first layer of our safety net before the funeral costs ate through the second. When he was gone, the house seemed to physically shrink. The hallways felt narrower. The ceilings felt lower. The air became thick with a permanent low-level panic that tasted like metal in the back of your throat. Mara, my mother, did not handle grief by becoming stronger. She handled it by becoming a victim. She worked double shifts at a diner, and I do not deny that she was tired. I saw her swollen ankles. I saw the way she soaked her feet in Epsom salts while watching late-night infomercials. But her exhaustion was not a shared burden. It was a weapon, and she used it to carve out a very specific hierarchy in our household, in the vacuum left by my father. Dylan became the sun and Mara became the planet orbiting him, desperate to keep him warm. I was just the space debris floating on the periphery. The narrative was established early. Dylan was sensitive. Dylan was the man of the house now, a title that came with 0 responsibilities and infinite excuses. If Dylan failed a math test, it was because the teacher did not understand his grief. If Dylan got into a fight at school, it was because he was defending the family honor. Marlowe would sit him down at the kitchen table, stroking his hair, whispering that the world was too hard for a boy with a heart as big as his. I was different. I was the sturdy one. I was the one who did not cry at the funeral because I was too busy holding Aunt Linda's hand. Because I did not cry, Mara decided I did not need comforting. "You are so strong, Brinley," she would say, usually while handing me a pile of laundry to fold. "You are just like me. We endure." She did not see that I was 8 years old and terrified. She only saw that I was useful. By the time we were teenagers, the dynamic had hardened into concrete. The financial anxiety in the house was a living thing. We learned to navigate the floorboards based on which one squeaked, just as we learned to navigate Mara's moods based on the stack of envelopes on the counter. If the stack was high, we stayed in our rooms. It was around this time that Dylan discovered his talent for losing money. It started innocently enough. It was not casinos or dark back rooms initially. It was sports. Dylan was obsessed with the Packers, the Bucks, the Brewers. He memorized stats with a focus he never applied to his algebra homework. He started betting $5 here, $10 there with kids at school. I remember the first time I realized it was a problem. I was 12. I walked into the living room and found Dylan, then 14, pacing back and forth in front of the television. He was sweating. It was November and the heat was set to 62 to save money, but his shirt was damp. "Come on," he was muttering, chewing on his thumbnail until it bled. "Cover the spread. Just cover the spread." When the game ended and his team lost, he threw the remote control at the wall. It shattered. Mara came running in not to scold him, but to soothe him. When he confessed, he owed a senior at school $40. She did not ground him. She went to her purse. She took out the grocery money. "He is just looking for an outlet," she told me later, as we ate pasta with butter because there was no money for sauce. "He is under so much pressure, Brinley. He wants to help us. He thought if he won he could buy me a new coat." She rewrote his addiction as an act of love, and because she paid his debts, he never learned the math of loss. He only learned that if he screamed loud enough, the consequences disappeared. I learned the opposite lesson. I learned that needs were liabilities. If I needed new shoes, I was a burden. If I needed help with homework, I was adding stress to a woman who was already breaking. So I learned to be invisible. I became the ghost of the household. I learned to fix the toilet flapper with a paperclip so we would not have to call a plumber. I learned to cook meals out of pantry scraps, stale crackers crushed over canned tuna, baked until it looked like a casserole. I walked 3 miles to school to save the bus fare, banking the quarters in a hollowed-out book on my shelf. I was not saving for a toy. I was saving for freedom. The breaking point, the moment that truly severed my emotional tether to them, happened when I was 16. I had entered a statewide mathematics competition. It was a big deal. My teacher had told me I had a natural gift for pattern recognition, for seeing the story inside the data. I had spent months preparing, staying late at the school library because it was the only place quiet enough to think. I made the finals. The ceremony was in Madison. I needed a ride. "I will be there," Mara had promised. She seemed genuine. She had even traded a shift with a coworker. "I am proud of you, Brinley. We will go out for ice cream after." I believed her. That was the last time I made the mistake of hope. The ceremony was on a Tuesday night. I stood in the lobby of the auditorium wearing a dress I had bought at Goodwill and altered myself. I watched the other students with their parents. I watched fathers adjusting ties and mothers holding bouquets of flowers. I waited. 7:00 came. The ceremony started. I sat in the third row. I kept turning around, scanning the doors at the back of the hall. Every time the heavy doors opened, my heart jumped. But it was never her. When they called my name as the second-place winner, I walked up to the stage. The lights were blinding. I shook the judge's hand. I looked out into the black void of the audience, desperate to see a familiar face, a wave, anything. There was nothing, just empty seats and strangers clapping politely. I accepted the certificate. I walked off stage. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face so I would not cry. Then I walked to the Greyhound station and bought a ticket home with my emergency money. I got back to the house after midnight. The lights were all on. I walked in expecting a disaster, a car accident, a hospital visit, a death. Instead, I found Morris sitting at the kitchen table holding a cup of tea. Dylan was slumped on the couch, staring at the floor, looking sullen. "You're back," Morris said. She didn't look at me. She looked tired, but not frantic. "Where were you?" I asked. My voice was very quiet. "You said you would drive me." "Oh, honey." Morris sighed, gesturing vaguely toward the living room. It was a crisis. Dylan had a bad evening. I looked at Dylan. He didn't look injured. He looked angry. "What happened?" I asked. "The Bucks blew a 12-point lead." Dylan muttered. I stared at him. "You missed my ceremony because of a basketball game." "It wasn't just a game," Dylan snapped, standing up. "I had money on it. Okay, real money. I was going to double it. I had a lock and they choked. I lost $200. Brinley, do you know what that feels like?" He was shouting at me as if he were the victim, as if his lost wager was a tragedy equal to a death in the family. I looked at Mara. I waited for her to correct him. I waited for her to tell him that he was selfish, that he had ruined my night for a gambling loss. "He was having a panic attack," Mara said softly. "He couldn't breathe. Brinley, I couldn't leave him alone. You know how he gets. He is so fragile." She looked at me with pleading eyes, asking me to understand, asking me to be the big girl, asking me to step aside once again for the golden boy and his demons. "I won second place," I said. "That is nice," Morris said, taking a sip of tea. "Put the certificate on the fridge. We can celebrate later. Right now, we need to figure out how to cover Dylan's shortfall before the first of the month." Something inside me clicked off. It was the sound of a heavy door locking. I realized then that love in this house was a competition. It was a zero-sum game, and I had not just lost. I had never even been registered to play. No matter what I achieved, no matter how good I would always be less important than Dylan's latest failure. His disasters were more captivating to her than my successes. I did not scream. I did not throw a vase. I simply nodded. "Okay," I said. "I am going to bed." "Good night," Morris said, already turning back to Dylan to discuss which bills they could skip paying this month. The next day, I began my real education. I stopped trying to impress them. I stopped trying to be part of the family unit. I began to view my life as a separate entity, a business that needed to be managed in a hostile market. I spent every free hour at the public library. I went to the nonfiction section, row 332, personal finance. I read everything. I read about compound interest. I read about index funds. I read about tax brackets and Roth IAS. I read books by men who wore suits I could never afford, and I translated their jargon into a language I could use. I learned that money was not a mystery, and it was not a monster. It was a tool. It was a system of levers and pulleys. Mara and Dylan viewed money as something that happened to them, a stroke of luck or a curse from God. I learned that money was something you commanded. I started a spreadsheet on the library computer. I did not have any capital to invest yet, but I created a simulation. I tracked stocks. I pretended to buy. I watched how the markets moved, how fear drove prices down and greed drove them up. I saw the patterns. I saw that the market was just like my household, emotional, irrational, and prone to panic. But unlike my family, the market had rules you could exploit. I got a job washing dishes at a diner on the other side of town, so Marlowe would not know I was working. If she knew I had a paycheck, she would find a reason why Dylan needed it. I hid my cash in a hollow curtain rod in my bedroom. Every dollar I saved was a brick and a wall I was building between me and them. I watched Dylan spiral. He moved from sports betting to online poker. He lost. He raged. He cried. And Mara bailed him out. She sold her jewelry. She took out payday loans with interest rates that made me physically ill to think about. They were drowning, clinging to each other in a toxic embrace, pulling each other down. I stood on the shore watching them, and I refused to jump in. They thought I was just quiet. They thought I was just the boring sister reading books in her room. They did not know that I was analyzing their mistakes like case studies. They did not know that every time Dylan demanded money, I was calculating exactly how much that outburst would cost him in 10 years if he had invested it instead. I was not just surviving anymore. I was plotting. And the $14 million on that screen 18 years later was not a miracle. It was the sum total of every birthday I spent alone, every pair of shoes I glued back together, and every single time I chose silence over validation. I built my fortune in the dark because that was the only place they let me live. My life became a study in duality. During the day, I was the quiet high school student who sat in the middle row, blending into the beige walls, and the daughter who silently washed the dishes while her mother complained about the price of ground beef. But at night, I was building a new world pixel by pixel. I realized that if I wanted to escape the gravitational pull of my family's poverty, saving quarters in a curtain rod was not going to be enough. I needed leverage. I needed a skill that could scale. I found my answer on a donated computer. At the public library, I started with free online courses, Code Academy, Khan Academy, obscure forums where data scientists argued about syntax. I taught myself Python and SQL, not because I loved computers, but because I loved the logic in coding. If you made a mistake, the program broke. It told you exactly where the error was. Line 42, syntax error. You fixed it and it worked. There was no gaslighting. The code never told you that the error was actually an act of love. The code never promised to work tomorrow if you just lent it $20 today. It was brutally, beautifully honest. I picked up shifts at a coffee shop called The Daily Grind. It was 3 a.m. from my house. I worked the closing shift from 4:00 in the afternoon until 10 at night. My hands smelled perpetually of roasted beans and sanitizer. I earned $7.25 an hour plus tips. Every Friday, I cashed my paycheck. I did not bring the money home. I knew the geography of my house was compromised. Mara had a radar for cash. If she knew I had $50, suddenly the electric bill would be overdue, or Dylan would need new tires for a car he barely drove. So on the day I turned 18, I walked into a bank downtown, a branch that my mother did not use, and I opened a custodial free checking and savings account. I declined the paper statements, everything digital, everything invisible. That was the day I stopped saving and started investing. It was terrifying to people like my mother. The stock market was a casino where rich people went to steal from poor people. But I had done the reading. I knew that over a 30-year timeline, the market was a machine that turned patience into wealth. I started small. I put $100 into a low-cost index fund that tracked the top 500 companies in America. I remember staring at the confirmation screen. I felt elated. I had just purchased a microscopic slice of the American economy. I owned a fraction of Apple, of Microsoft, of Exxon. I bought a black notebook. This became my decision journal. I wrote down the date, the amount, the price, and exactly why I was buying. Entry 1, October 14th. Bought SB 500 index. Reason betting on the aggregate productivity of the market rather than individual winners. Time horizon forever. While I was building a ladder to climb out of the hole, Dylan was busy digging the floor deeper. Dylan did not believe in systems. He believed in destiny. He treated sports betting like it was a spiritual practice. He would sit at the kitchen table with the sports section of the newspaper spread out like sacred scrolls. He would tell me he had a feeling about the Bears' game. He would say the line was disrespectful to the quarterback. He used words like lock and guarantee. I watched him lose $500 on a Tuesday night because a kicker missed a field goal in overtime. The house exploded. He punched a hole in the drywall next to the pantry. He screamed that the game was rigged, that the referees were on the peril, that the universe was conspiring against him. Mara did not tell him to stop. She did not tell him to get a second job to cover the loss. She made him a cup of hot chocolate. "It is okay, honey." She soothed him, rubbing his back as he hyperventilated. "You just had bad luck. You called it right." "I know you did. Next time it will turn around." She gave him money from the jar where she was saving for her dental work. She literally took the teeth out of her own mouth to feed his addiction. I sat at the card table doing my calculus homework, and I wrote in my notebook. Entry 4, November 2nd, market down 2%. Dylan lost rent money on the spread. buying more index units while prices are lower. Emotion is the enemy of equity. The gap between us was widening, not just financially, but philosophically. They lived in a world of magical thinking where they were victims of circumstance, waiting for a lottery win to save them. I lived in a world of compound interest and probability, where I was the architect of my own safety. Then came the escape plan. I knew I could not stay in Milwaukee. The gravity was too strong. If I stayed, I would eventually be sucked in. I would end up paying the electric bill just this once, and then just for a few months, and 10 years later, I would be paying Dylan's bail. I aimed for Colorado Frontier State University. It was a good school, but more importantly, it was 1,000 miles away. It had mountains. It had clean air. It had a physical barrier between me and the ranch house. I did the application in secret. I filled out the financial aid forms at the library, estimating my mother's income based on tax returns I found in a shoebox under her bed. I wrote my essays during my breaks at the coffee shop. I applied for every scholarship I could find. Pell Grants, merit scholarships, a grant for women in STEM, a local Rotary Club award for $500. I hunted for money with the same intensity Dylan hunted for parlays. When the acceptance letter came, it was a thick envelope. I intercepted it from the mailbox before Mara got home. I took it to my room and opened it with a letter opener. Accepted. Full tuition covered by a combination of grants and scholarships. I only had to cover living expenses. I felt like I had just cut the wire on a bomb with 1 second left on the timer. I waited until dinner to tell them we were having meatloaf. The mood was tense because Dylan was waiting on the result of a hockey game. I got into college, I said. Mara looked up from her plate. She blinked. College. The community college down the street. No, I said. Frontier State in Colorado. The fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Colorado. Yes, that is far, she said. Her voice was not filled with pride. It was filled with accusation. Why would you go so far? They have a good data analytics program, I said. But we have schools here, Mara. Good schools. Why do you need to go across the country? Who is going to help me with the house? Who is going to drive Dylan to his interviews when the car acts up? There it was, the truth. She did not miss me. She missed my utility. I have a full scholarship. Mom, I said it is free. I can't turn it down. Nothing is free, Dylan muttered, not looking up from his phone. You will probably hate it. It is cold in Colorado. It is cold here, Dylan, I said. I just don't think you are thinking about the family, Mara said, putting her fork down. Her appetite was gone, ruined by my success. You are leading us when things are so tight. It feels selfish, Brinley. It really does. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had missed my award ceremony for a gambling loss. I looked at the brother who treated me like a servant. I am going, I said. I start in August. The summer passed in a blur of double shifts. I saved every penny. I bought a used laptop, a sturdy backpack, and a one-way bus ticket. The morning I left, there was no fanfare. Mara was asleep. She had worked a late shift. Dylan was asleep. He had been up until 4 in the morning playing online poker. I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter. Gone to school. Will call when I land. Love, Brinley. I walked to the bus stop with 2 suitcases containing my entire life. When the bus pulled onto the highway and I saw the Welcome to Wisconsin sign in the rear view mirror, I did not cry. I felt my lungs expand. For the first time in 18 years, I was breathing air that did not belong to them. Frontier State was a revelation. The campus was sprawling in green, framed by the jagged purple peaks of the Rockies. But the real education wasn't in the lecture halls. It was in the freedom of anonymity. No one here knew I was the girl with the gambling addict brother. No one knew my mother worked in a diner. I was just Brinley. I was a blank spreadsheet waiting for data. I needed money for rent and food. The scholarship covered tuition, but I refused to take out loans for living expenses if I could avoid it. I remembered the coding. I went onto a freelancing platform. I created a profile, data visualization expert, -SQL, Tableau. My first client was a small bakery in Denver that wanted to track which pastries sold best on rainy days versus sunny days. It was a simple project. I pulled their sales data, cross-referenced it with historical weather data, and built a colorful interactive dashboard. It took me 6 hours. I charged them $300. When the notification popped up on my phone, payment received $300. I stared at it. That was a week of scrubbing floors at the coffee shop. That was 40 hours of listening to customers complain about their lattes. And I had made it in an afternoon sitting in my dorm room using my brain. I realized then that the online nonsense my family mocked was not a game. It was alchemy. I could turn data into clarity, and clarity was something people would pay for. I ramped up. I took on jobs for a landscaping company, a local dentist, a boutique clothing store. I built cash flow models. I built inventory trackers. I automated email lists. I was 19 years old, sitting in a dorm room with a roommate who was partying every night. And I was running a consulting firm of one. I remember one specific night. It was snowing outside. I was working on a complex visualization for a logistics company. My phone rang. It was Mara. "Dylan needs help," she said, skipping the hello. "He got a ticket. His registration was expired. They towed the car. Brinley, we need $400 to get it out of the impound lot, or they will auction it off." "I don't have it, Mom." I said. "You're working out there, aren't you?" She pressed. "You must have something just in advance. He has an interview on Monday. He needs the car." I looked at my screen. My bank balance was sitting at $4,000. I had the money. I could have wired it in 10 seconds. But I looked at the code I had written. It was clean. It was logical. It was built on rules. If you break the rules of the code, the program fails. If I broke my own rules now, my life would fail. "I am a student." "Mom," I said, "I am eating ramen. I don't have $400 for a tow truck." "Fine," she snapped. "I guess he will just miss the interview. I hope you are happy." She hung up. I put the phone down. I went back to my code. I finished the project. The client paid me $600 the next morning. I took that $600 and I bought shares in a semiconductor company that was designing chips for cloud computing. I wrote it in my journal. Entry 22, January 12th. Denied bailout request. Invested proceeds in infrastructure. I am not the safety net anymore. That was the moment I truly left home. Not when I got on the bus, but when I kept my money in my pocket. I realized that the thing they despised, my computer, my fake job, my cold logic, was the only thing that was going to feed me. And I was going to let it feed me until I was so full they could never starve me again. After graduation, I did not return to Wisconsin. I did not even look back. I drove my beat-up sedan straight into the heart of Denver's tech corridor and parked it in the garage of Summit Harbor Analytics. Summit Harbor was not a bank. It was a fintech firm, which meant we did not deal in gold bars or vaults. We dealt in data. We built the plumbing that allowed money to move through the internet, the APIs, the risk assessment algorithms, the fraud detection layers that happen in the milliseconds between you swiping your card and the coffee machine turning on. The office was a glass box of silence and air conditioning. It was my sanctuary. There was no shouting here. There were no emotional outbursts. There was only the hum of servers and the click of mechanical keyboards. I started as a junior analyst on the risk product team. My job was to look at transaction patterns and identify anomalies. I was looking for the story behind the spending. I learned very quickly that a financial report is not just a spreadsheet. It is a map of human behavior. If you know how to read a balance sheet, you know a company's secrets. If you know how to read a capitalization table or a cap table, you know who actually holds the power. I learned to look at burn rate, which is how fast a company dies if it stops making money. I learned about churn, which is how many people hate your product enough to leave. I fell in love with the clarity of it. In my family, truth was fluid. It changed depending on who was shouting the loudest. In finance, truth was binary. Either the money was there or it was not. While my colleagues were buying Teslas and financing ski condos in Vail with their bonuses, I lived like a monk. I rented a small studio apartment. I shopped at discount grocery stores. I drove my old car until the transmission finally gave up. And then I bought a used Honda. I was not hoarding money to swim in it. I was hoarding it to buy my way onto the other side of the table. I started angel investing to the uninitiated. Angel investing sounds like something only billionaires do, but the landscape had changed. There were platforms now, accredited investor portals where you could buy into a startup for as little as $1 or $2,000. It was risky. It was essentially gambling. But unlike Dylan's parlays, the odds here were based on due diligence, not superstition. I focused on what I knew: payments, back-end infrastructure, unsexy software that made banks run faster. I remember my first real win. I had put $5,000 money I had scraped together from overtime and bonuses into a small company building a bridge between legacy banking systems and crypto wallets. It was boring, technical, and absolutely necessary. 18 months later, a major credit card processor acquired them. I was sitting at my desk at Summit Harbor when the email came through. I opened the attachment. I looked at the payout figure, $82,000. My $5,000 had become $82,000 in less than 2 years. I did not scream. I did not call anyone. I simply closed the tab, walked to the break room, and made myself a cup of free office coffee. I stood by the window looking out at the Rocky Mountains, my heart beating a steady, heavy rhythm. Most people would have bought a car. Dylan would have booked a suite in Vegas. I went back to my desk and reinvested $70,000 of it into a diversified basket of 4 other startups. I kept $12,000 in cash as an emergency fund. I did not buy a single new piece of clothing. That wind changed my brain chemistry. It validated everything I had suspected. Wealth was not about working harder. It was about ownership. It was about placing your capital in the path of progress and waiting for the collision. But as my net worth began its quiet vertical climb, the situation in Milwaukee began to bleed into my life. I had established a rule with myself: I would help, but I would not enable. I sent Mara a check for $500 on the first of every month. I told her it was for groceries and bills. In my mind, it was a tax. It was the price I paid to keep the ghosts at bay. Then the request started getting specific. The furnace died. Brinley, Mara told me over the phone one November. Her voice was thin and panicked. "It is freezing here. The repairman says it is the blower motor. It is $1,200. Send me the invoice," I said automatically. "I will pay the vendor directly." "Oh, he is a local guy," she stammered. "He doesn't do email invoices. He needs cash up front to buy the parts. You know how it is." I hesitated. My risk analyst brain flashed a red warning light. But I remembered the cold in that house. I remembered shivering under thin blankets. "Okay," I said. "I will transfer the money to you, but I want a picture of the receipt when it is done." "Of course, honey. Thank you. You are saving us." I sent the $1,200. 2 months later, it was the water heater, $1,500. Again, cash only. Again, urgent. Then it was a root canal, $800. I was sending the money because I could afford it, and because part of me wanted to believe that my success could actually fix things. I wanted to believe that if I threw enough money at the problem, my mother would stop being a victim. But I worked in fraud detection. It was literally my profession to spot inconsistencies. The realization hit me on a Tuesday in April. Mara had called asking for $600 for a car deductible because someone had sideswiped her in the parking lot. I sent the money. An hour later, I was scrolling through Facebook on my lunch break. I rarely checked it, but I had a burner account I used to keep tabs on distant relatives. I clicked on Dylan's profile. He usually kept his post private, but he had tagged a friend. So this one showed up on my feed. It was a photo of a betting slip, a parlay ticket for an NBA game that night. The caption read, "Back in the game. Baby. Big stakes tonight. Feeling lucky." I zoomed in on the photo. The timestamp on the ticket was 45 minutes after I had transferred the money to Mara. The amount wagered was exactly $550. I felt a cold sensation wash over me, starting at my scalp and moving down to my fingertips. I opened a new tab. I pulled up the weather history for Milwaukee for the week. The furnace supposedly broke. It had been unseasonably warm, lows in the 50s. I called the dentist Mara claimed to see. I pretended to be an insurance auditor. "I am just verifying a procedure for Mara," Perry on February 12th, I said. One moment. The receptionist said. Then I am sorry. We haven't seen Mrs. Perry since her cleaning last August. I hung up. I sat there in my ergonomic chair, surrounded by the hum of millions of dollars moving through the server farm, and I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. It wasn't the money. The money was negligible to me at that point. It was the coordination. Marla wasn't just enabling Dylan. She was laundering money for him. She was inventing crisis physical pain, freezing temperatures, broken homes to extract cash from me, which she then handed to him to set on fire. She was using my empathy as a credit line for his addiction. They were a team, and I was the mark. That afternoon, I made a decision that would define the next decade of my life. I did not confront them. I did not scream. If I screamed, they would just gaslight me. They would say I was paranoid or stingy or that I didn't understand how family works. Instead, I went corporate. I contacted a lawyer in Denver. I told him I wanted to form an LLC. What is the nature of the business? He asked. Asset management and private equity. I said, and the name? I thought about it. I wanted something that sounded boring, something that sounded like a geological feature, immovable and uninteresting. Perry Ridge Ventures, I said. We filed the paperwork. I obtained an employer identification number. I opened business bank accounts. I hired a CPA who specialized in high net worth individuals. I began to treat my life like a black operation. I continued to work at Summit Harbor, but my real work was Perry Ridge. I poured every spare dollar into the fund. I stopped keeping cash in my personal checking account, where a stray glance could see it. My personal account always showed a balance of maybe $2 or $3,000, just enough to look like a struggling millennial. Everything else, the gains from the tech stocks, the dividends, the payouts from the angel investments went straight into the dark pool of Perry Ridge Ventures. I visited home once a year. I rented the cheapest economy car available at the airport. I wore jeans and sweaters I had owned since college. When they asked about work, I complained. My boss is a nightmare. I would lie over Thanksgiving turkey. They cut our bonuses again. The industry is really unstable. See, Dylan would sneer, his mouth full of stuffing. I told you, that computer stuff is a bubble. You are right, Dylan, I would say. You are absolutely right. And while he lectured me on the economy, I would be mentally calculating the series around I had just led for a logistics AI company. My wealth grew like water in a reservoir. It was silent. It was deep, and it was rising. By the time I was 30, Perry Ridge Ventures was not just a shell. It was a formidable entity. I had holdings in 12 companies. I had a diversified portfolio of index funds. I had commercial real estate investment trusts. The number on the screen kept ticking up. 2 million, 5 million, 8 million. It became a game of psychological endurance. I was living two lives. In one, I was the disappointing daughter who lived in a small apartment and couldn't afford to buy her mother a new car. In the other, I was a sophisticated investor who could have bought the entire block my mother lived on with a wire transfer. The secrecy was not just about protection anymore. It was about control. For the first time in my life, I had something they could not touch. I had something they did not even know existed. But secrets like that are heavy. They take up space, and as the number grew, the pressure grew. I knew that eventually the dam would break. I just didn't know it would happen over a plate of cold mashed potatoes. I kept sending the monthly check, $500, never a penny more. When Morrow called with a new emergency, the roof, the transmission, the cat's vet bill, I started saying no. I don't have it, Mom. I would say things are tight, but you are working so hard. She would wail. Where does it all go? Rent is high in Denver. I would say you should move home. She would suggest you could save money. You could help Dylan with his business ideas. Maybe someday. I would say I would hang up the phone, open my laptop, log into the Perry Ridge dashboard, and watch the numbers shift. I was building a fortress. I just didn't realize that I was also building a trap. And on that Christmas night, when I left the laptop open, I didn't just reveal a bank balance. I revealed the depth of my deception. To them, the $14 million wasn't just money. It was proof that for 10 years I had been watching them struggle, and I had chosen to do nothing. They didn't understand that I hadn't chosen to do nothing. I had chosen to save myself, but to a family that feeds on its own. Self-preservation looks exactly like betrayal. The phone call that set the stage for the disaster came 2 weeks before Christmas. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was in my apartment in Denver reviewing the prospectus for a Series B funding round for a biometrics company. When my phone buzzed and I saw the word Mom on the screen, my heart rate did not spike, but my shoulders instinctively locked up. I let it ring 3 times. That was my rule. Answer on the first ring and you look eager. Answer on the third and you look busy. "Hi, Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh, Brinley," Mara sighed. There was no hello. She launched straight into the performance. "I was just at the grocery store. Have you seen the price of eggs? It is criminal. I do not know how regular people are supposed to survive." I stared at my monitor where a spreadsheet column showed a projected return on investment of 300% over 5 years. "It is tough everywhere," I said, playing my part in the script. "It is especially tough for Dylan," she pivoted. It took her less than 30 seconds. "He is trying so hard, Brinley. He really is. He has been networking for this sales position at a logistics firm. High commissions. It could be the big break." "That sounds promising," I said. I knew there was no job. Or if there was, Dylan would lose it within a month because he would be checking parlays during a client meeting. "The problem is the car," Mara said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He cannot pull up to a client meeting in that rust bucket he drives. It sends the wrong message. You know how sales is. It is all about image. He needs something that says success." I closed my eyes. "What are you asking, Mom?" "He found a BMW," she said quickly. "Used but clean. It is a 5 Series. The guy wants $42,000. If we could just put down half, the payments would be manageable. If you could just help him with the down payment. Brinley, I really think this would be the turning point. He just needs a win." I almost laughed. I held the phone away from my ear for a second. The turning point. We had passed the turning point 10 years ago. We were now just spiraling down the drain. $42,000. I had wired that exact amount that morning to a contractor in San Francisco without blinking, but giving it to Dylan was not spending. It was burning. "No," I said. "Brinley, please," she started, the whine creeping in. "He is your brother. I am not buying Dylan a BMW." "Mom," I said firmly, "I am not doing this." "So you do not care if he fails?" "I care that he pays his own bills," I said. "I am not discussing this." Silence on the line. I could hear her breathing, calculating her next move. She realized the direct assault had failed, so she switched to the guilt maneuver. "Fine," she said, her voice icy. "I guess we will just figure it out like we always do. I just hope we can afford a decent Christmas dinner this year. With the heating bill being what it is, I was thinking we might just do sandwiches." It was a trap, and I walked right into it because it was easier than fighting. "Don't do sandwiches," I said. "I will handle dinner. I will cater it. I will have everything delivered. You do not have to cook. You do not have to buy anything." "Oh," she said, her tone instantly brightening. "Well, that would be nice. Since you are refusing to help your brother, I suppose that is the least you can do." That was the preamble. That was the mood music. When I arrived in Milwaukee on Christmas Eve, I checked into a mid-range hotel near the airport. I did not stay at the house. I told Mara it was because I needed to work late and did not want to disturb them. But the truth was, I could not sleep under that roof. The air there felt heavy, like it was pressurized with resentment. I arrived at the house at 3:00 in the afternoon on Christmas Day. I had ordered the food from the best steakhouse in Milwaukee. I had treated the order like a logistical operation. Prime rib, medium rare, truffle mashed potatoes, creamed spinach, lobster bisque, 3 different kinds of pie. I had confirmed the delivery time twice. When the van pulled up, the driver unloaded 4 massive heated boxes. The smell of roasted meat and rich butter filled the driveway, momentarily overpowering the smell of damp leaves and neglect that usually surrounded the property. I carried the boxes in. Mara was in the kitchen wearing a festive apron that looked ridiculous because she wasn't cooking anything. "Wow," Aunt Linda said, peering into the boxes as I unpacked them. "Look at this spread. Prime red. This must have cost a fortune." I opened my mouth to say yes, it did. And I was happy to do it, but Marlar cut me off. "Oh, you know Brinley," Morris said, waving a hand dismissively while she arranged the meat on a platter. "She is always on that computer. She found some kind of coupon code or a group deal. You know how they have those internet discounts for things that are about to expire. She got it for pennies on the dollar." I froze. I was holding a container of lobster bisque that cost $1.80 a quart. It wasn't a coupon. "Mom," I said quietly. "It is smart," Uncle Rick said, nodding at me. "My nephew does that. He scours the web for glitches, gets stuff for free. Good for you, Brinley. Way to work the system." They didn't see generosity. They saw scamming. They assumed that because I was good with computers, I had simply tricked an algorithm into sending us food. If I had paid full price, that would mean I had money. And if I had money, Mara would have to explain why I wasn't buying Dylan a BMW. So, in her narrative, the food had to be cheap. It had to be a trick. I set the soup down. "Enjoy the food," I said tightly. We moved to the dining room. The table was set. The television was on. It was always on. Dylan was not there. "Where is Dylan?" I asked, taking my seat at the wobbly card table extension. "He is coming," Mara said, pouring wine. "He had to take a call. Important business." He walked in 10 minutes later. He did not look like a man doing important business. He looked like a man who had not slept in 2 days. He was wearing jeans and that tight Packers jersey. He didn't even look at the table. His eyes were glued to his phone screen. "Hey," he grunted to the room in general. He sat down at the head of the table. He didn't look at me. He didn't say, "Hi, Brinley. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the $500 of prime rib on my plate." He tapped his screen furiously. I knew that tap. He was refreshing a live betting app. "Put the phone away, Dylan," Marlar said gently. "It is Christmas." "Hang on," Dylan snapped. "The spread just shifted. I need to hedge this." He tapped for another 30 seconds, then slammed the phone down on the table. Face up, he finally looked at the food. "Steak," he said. "Ice." He forked a massive slab of meat onto his plate without asking for the platter to be passed. I had my leather bag next to my feet. Inside was my laptop. I had brought it for a specific reason. The Asian markets were opening in an hour, and Perry Ridge Ventures had a significant position in a Japanese robotics firm that was facing a regulatory ruling. I needed to see the opening bell. It was a 10 million position. I couldn't just ignore it because Aunt Linder wanted to talk about her cats. So, Uncle Rick said, chewing loudly, "This meat is good. Really good. You got this on a discount." Mara said, "That is right." I said, staring at my plate. "A discount. Must be nice," Rick said. "Everything is so expensive now. Gas is up. Rent is up. I do not know how the young people do it." "Brinley, you are still renting." "Right in Denver." "Yes," I said. "I rent." I didn't mention that I rented a 2-bedroom penthouse in the Lotto district with a view of Cause Field, or that I could have bought the building if I liquidated my bond portfolio. "See, that is the problem," Aunt Linder chimed in. "No equity. You throw that money away every month. You really should look into buying a starter home, honey. Even a condo, something to build a future on." I took a sip of water. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. These people who had refinanced their homes 3 times to pay off credit card debt were giving me financial advice. "I will keep that in mind," I said. "And how is the job?" Cousin Ashley asked. She worked as a dental hygienist and considered herself the success story of the family because she had a 401k with $4,000 in it. "Still doing the data thing?" "Yes," I said. "Still doing the data thing." "Is it safe?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. "I heard about all those tech layoffs, Twitter, Facebook. It seems so unstable. One day you are coding, the next day your badge does not work." "It can be volatile," I agreed, "but I managed the risk." "Risk?" Dylan scoffed. He had finished his steak in record time and was reaching for seconds. "You don't know risk, Bryn. Risk is having $5 grand on the line in the fourth quarter. Risk is having the courage to back your gut. You just crunch numbers. That is not risk. That is accounting. It is analytics, Dylan, I said. Same thing. He waved his fork. It is boring. It is for people who are scared to play the real game. Mara laughed. It was a nervous titter designed to diffuse the tension, but it landed like a slap. Now, Dylan, be nice, she said. Not everyone has your spirit. Brinley likes her safety. She likes her little routine. She looked at me with that pitying smile again, the one that said, I love you, even though you are mediocre. We are just worried about you, sweetie. Mara continued, addressing the whole table now. She is 34, no husband, no kids, and this job. I mean, does it even have a pension? Do you have benefits? I have health insurance, Mom, I said. But a pension, she insisted. Real security like your father had. Something that takes care of you when you are old because you cannot stare at a screen forever. Eventually your eyes go. And then what? The table chuckled. It was a collective release of anxiety. They were all struggling. They were all afraid of the future. But at least they weren't Brinley. At least they weren't diluting themselves with internet money. They had tangible problems. I had invisible ones. She is right, Uncle Rick said, wiping gravy from his chin. You got to think about the long term, Brinley. You don't want to wake up at 50 with nothing but a hard drive. I felt a vibration in my bag. It was a notification on my phone, linked to my laptop. The Japanese market had just opened. The ruling had been announced. I needed to check. The conversation swirled around me. They were comparing the price of milk. They were complaining about the mayor. They were bonding over their shared helplessness. I looked at Mar. She was beaming. She had her family together. She had good food that she didn't pay for. She had successfully framed her daughter as a charity case and her son as a misunderstood genius. It is okay, Mara said, reaching over and patting my hand. Her palm was damp. We know you are doing your best, and maybe next year, if the economy picks up, you can find something more traditional. Maybe a bank teller job or administration, something with a name tag. Nah, Dylan snickered. Get a name tag. Bryn, let people know who you are. I smiled. It was the smile I had perfected over 3 decades. It was a porcelain mask. You are right, Mom. I said, I should really think about my future. That is my girl. She said, satisfied. I pushed my chair back. I am just going to check on something in my bag. I said, I think I left my phone charger in there. Don't be long, Marlowe said. I am going to cut the pie. I won't be long. I promised. I stood up. I walked out of the dining room, away from the smell of the meat I had paid for, away from the family that despised me. I walked into the living room. I sat on the sofa. I pulled out the laptop. I did not know it then, but I was seconds away from detonating a nuclear bomb in the center of my own life. I opened the lid. I logged in. The screen came to life bright and sharp. I checked the Japanese feed. The ruling was favorable. The stock had jumped 15% at the open. My portfolio updated in real time. The number refreshed. I took a deep breath. I was about to close the lid. I was about to go back and eat apple pie and listen to them tell me I was a failure. But then I heard Mara scream from the kitchen about the whipped cream. Distracted, I stood up. I turned and I left the screen glowing in the dark. I sat on the edge of the beige floral sofa, the cushion sagging under my weight. My heart was beating a rhythm that had nothing to do with holiday cheer and everything to do with the volatility of the Asian markets. The laptop balanced on my knees was a portal to a different universe, one where logic dictated outcomes and effort yielded measurable results. I clicked open the email from the founder of the robotics firm in Tokyo. It was time-stamped 3 minutes ago. The subject line was a single word, approved. I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. The regulatory hurdles had been cleared. The stock was already reacting and after hours trading. I toggled back to my main dashboard on Perry Ridge Ventures. The portfolio value was updating in real time, the numbers flickering and climbing. 14,182,640. It was a staggering number. It was enough to buy this entire neighborhood. It was enough to buy freedom. It was the sum total of 15 years of skipped meals, late nights, and the ruthless suppression of my own desires. "Brinley, the pie is getting cold." Mara's voice cut through the air like a serrated knife. Panic, irrational and childish, spiked in my chest. It was the reflex of a 12-year-old girl who knew she was taking too long in the bathroom. I scrambled up. I needed to get back to the table. I needed to perform. I closed the email tab. I meant to hit the sleep key. I meant to close the lid, but my thumb slipped on the trackpad and my mind was already 3 rooms away, bracing for my mother's criticism. I stood up, leaving the laptop open on the coffee table, the screen glowing bright blue in the dim room. I walked toward the kitchen. I made it 3 steps into the hallway. Then I heard Dylan. He had bypassed the dining room and come straight into the living room, likely looking for a place to make a private call to his bookie. I heard his heavy boots stop on the carpet. There was a pause. It lasted exactly 2 seconds. It was the silence of a bomb taking a breath before detonation. "What the hell?" Dylan whispered. I froze in the hallway. My stomach dropped through the floor. I spun around, but it was too late. Dylan was standing over the coffee table. The blue light from the screen illuminated his face, casting long skeletal shadows across his features. His eyes were wide, fixed on the bold white font in the center of the black dashboard. He wasn't reading a text message. He was reading my soul. "Mom," he croaked. Then his voice rose, cracking with a mix of hysteria and rage. "Mom, get in here." The dining room chair scraped against the floor. "What is it?" Mara called out, annoyed. Dylan stopped shouting. "Everyone." Dylan roared. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen, never taking his eyes off it. "Get in here right now. You have to see this." Mara appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a napkin. Aunt Linda and Uncle Rick followed, their faces masks of confusion. Cousin Ashley peeked around the corner. I stood paralyzed near the bookshelf. I wanted to run. I wanted to vomit. "What is wrong with you?" Mara asked, stepping into the living room. "Did you lose another bet?" "No," Dylan said. He looked up, and his eyes found me. They were not the eyes of a brother. They were the eyes of a stranger looking at a winning lottery ticket that had been stolen from him. "Look at her computer. Just look at it." Mara frowned. She walked over to the sofa. She looked down. She squinted. She leaned closer. She read the number, $14 million. The air left the room. It was sucked out instantly, leaving a vacuum so intense my ears popped. Mara stood up slowly. She looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. Her face did not light up with pride. There was no joy. Her expression crumpled into something ugly, a mixture of betrayal and fury. "Is this real?" she whispered. "It is real," Dylan shouted, his voice vibrating. "Look at. That is a portfolio. That is her name right there. Perry Ridge Ventures. That is her." He turned to me. "You have $14 million." I opened my mouth, but my throat was dry as sandpaper. "It is assets under management," I stammered, falling back on technicalities. "It is not all liquid. It is equity in companies." "It is." "Shut up," Dylan screamed. He slammed his hand onto the back of the sofa, sending a cloud of dust into the air. "Don't give me that technical garbage. Is that your money? Yes or no?" "Yes," I said. The word was barely a whisper, but it landed like a gunshot. "Oh my God!" Aunt Linda gasped, hand over her mouth. "Brinley." Mara took a step toward me. Her eyes were wet, but not with happy tears. She looked at me with the same expression she used when I broke a plate as a child. "How dare you?" she hissed. I blinked, confused. "But how dare you?" she repeated, her voice rising to a shriek. "We are sitting here eating sandwiches." "Well, we would have been eating sandwiches if you hadn't brought that charity food. I am clipping coupons. I am driving a car with a broken heater, and you have $14 million sitting in a computer. I send you money every month," I said, my voice shaking. $500. Dylan laughed. It was a manic, terrifying sound. "She sends $500. She is sitting on a mountain of gold and she throws us pennies. You are sick. You are actually sick." "I earned that money," I said, finding a shred of my voice. "I worked for it. I invested it. We are family." Mara screamed. She gestured wildly at the room, at the peeling wallpaper, at the worn carpet. Look at us, Brinley. Look at your brother. He is drowning. He is out there trying to scrape together a life. And you are hoarding this. You watched him struggle. You watched me cry over electric bills. I paid the electric bills. I yelled back. You could have paid them for the rest of our lives and not even noticed. Mara countered. You lied to us. You sat at my table. You ate my food. And you pretended to be one of us. You laughed when we worried about money. Were you laughing inside? Were you mocking us? I was protecting myself. I said, from her. Dylan stepped around the coffee table, closing the distance between us. He was big, and for the first time in years, he looked physically threatening. From your family. We are the only people who give a damn about you. You don't give a damn about me. I said, my voice hardening. You give a damn about what I can do for you. That is not true. Aunt Linda chimed in from the corner. Brinley, honey, family shares. That is just how it is. If you have that much, well, it is only right to help your brother get on his feet. He just needs a start. I need 50,000, Dylan said. He wasn't asking. He was calculating. Right now I have debts. Brinley, bad debts. People who don't take checks. You need to wire it tonight. And the car, Mara added, her mind racing to catch up. The BMW, you can buy it cash. It is nothing to you. It is pocket change. And I want to invest, Dylan continued, his eyes darting back to the screen. You need to put $1 million into my account. I will manage it. I have ideas. I just never had the capital. They were carving me up. I was still standing there breathing, and they were already dividing the carcass. No, I said. The room went silent again. What did you say? Dylan asked, his voice dropping to a low growl. I said, no, I repeated. I stood up straighter. I am not buying you a car. I am not paying your gambling debts, and I'm certainly not giving you $1 million to lose on a basketball game. You selfish little brat. Mara spat. After everything I sacrificed for you, I raised you alone. I worked double shifts. You worked double shifts to pay for Dylan, and shouted. The dam finally broke. 30 years of silence shattered. You missed my graduation. You missed my awards. You forgot my birthdays because Dylan had a headache or a heartache or a bad beat. I raised myself. Mom, I built this. Me, not you. I am your mother. Mara screamed, her face turning blotchy red. I am entitled to respect. I am entitled to be taken care of. I have taken care of you, I said cold. I have sent you thousands of dollars over the years. And what did you do with it? You gave it to him. I pointed at Dylan. I saw the records. Mom, I know about the furnace that never broke. I know about the dental work you never got. You laundered my money to feed his addiction. Mara went pale. You spied on me. I audited you. I corrected. Dylan lunged. It wasn't a calculated move. It was pure animalistic rage. He didn't come for me. He went for the laptop. He needed to possess the thing that held the power. He reached out with both hands, his fingers hooked like claws. Give it to me, he yelled. Transfer it. You owe me. You owe me for being the one who stayed. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stepped between him and the coffee table. Don't touch it, I said. My voice was no longer the voice of the daughter. It was the voice of the risk officer. It was steel and ice. Get out of my way, Dylan snarled, his face inches from mine. I could smell the stale beer and the desperation on his breath. I am taking it. I am transferring it tonight. If you touch that computer, I said, looking him dead in the eye, I will call the police. I will have you arrested for attempted theft and grand larceny. And with your record, Dylan, and the amount on that screen, you will go away for a very long time. The threat hung in the air, vibrating. Dylan stopped. His hands were hovering inches from my shoulders. He looked at me, searching for the sister who used to fold his laundry, the sister who used to apologize for existing. He didn't find her. He looked at Mara. Mara looked at me with genuine fear. For the first time, they realized that the dynamic had inverted. I was not the small thing in the corner anymore. I was the bank. I was the institution. And institutions do not negotiate with terrorists, even if they share the same DNA. You wouldn't, Dylan whispered. You wouldn't call the cops on your brother. Try me, I said. Touch the laptop. See what happens. The silence, that followed was heavy and suffocating. The television in the dining room was still blaring, a canned audience cheering for a touchdown, unaware that in the living room the game had just ended and everyone had lost. I walked out of that house with my laptop bag gripped so tightly in my hand that my knuckles turned white. I did not run. I did not give them the satisfaction of seeing me flee. I walked with the deliberate, measured pace of someone exiting a burning building who has already calculated the blast radius. Behind me, the house was not silent. I could hear Mara sobbing, a loud theatrical wail meant to penetrate the drywall and reach the neighbors. I could hear Dylan shouting something incoherent, the sound of a chair being kicked over, and the frantic murmuring of my relatives who were now witnessing the collapse of the illusion. I reached my rental car, unlocked it, and threw my bag onto the passenger seat. I got in and locked the doors. Only then did I exhale. The air inside the car was freezing, biting at my exposed skin, but I welcomed it. It felt clean. It felt sterile. I started the engine and reversed out of the driveway without looking back. As I turned onto the dark suburban street, my phone, which I had tossed into the cup holder, began to vibrate. It started as a single buzz, then another. Then it became a continuous, angry spasm against the plastic console. I did not look at it until I was 5 miles away, parked in the brightly lit lot of a 24-hour gas station. I needed to stop. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump that follows a confrontation. I needed water. I needed to reset my biological systems. I picked up the phone. The screen was a cascade of notifications. 17 missed calls, 12 text messages, 3 notifications from Facebook Messenger. I opened the text thread first. Mara, you have destroyed this family. I hope you are happy. Your father is rolling in his grave. Mara, come back right now and fix this. Dylan is hurting. You triggered him. Dylan, you think you are better than us. You are nothing. Dylan, answer the phone. Dylan, I know you are at the hotel. I am coming over. Aunt Linda Brinley, please answer your mother. She is hyperventilating. We just want to talk. I stared at the words. They were disjointed, desperate, and designed to hook into the soft parts of my psyche, but the soft parts were gone. They had been cauterized in that living room when Dylan tried to physically seize my property. I blocked Dylan's number first, then I muted Mara. I drove back to my hotel. It was a generic chain hotel near the airport, the kind with beige walls and abstract art that meant nothing. I double-locked the door. I put the chain across. I wedged a chair under the handle. It was paranoid, perhaps, but I knew Dylan when he was cornered. He was not a strategist. He was a battering ram. I sat on the bed and opened my laptop, not to work, but to document in my line of work. If it is not recorded, it did not happen. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Evidence. I took screenshots of every text message. I saved the voicemails Mara had left, listening to only the first 3 seconds of each to confirm the sender before saving them. Her voice shifted from weeping to screaming and back again. A master class in emotional manipulation. Then my phone pinged with a notification from Facebook. I rarely use the platform, keeping it only to monitor the family dynamics from a safe distance. I clicked the icon, my stomach turned over. Mara had posted a status update. It was posted 11 minutes ago. It already had 42 likes and 16 comments. The post read, I never thought I would say this, but money really is the root of all evil. My own daughter, who I raised with blood and sweat after her father died, came home for Christmas just to laugh at us. She is sitting on millions of dollars, literally millions, while her brother can barely afford rent, and I'm struggling to heat my house. She looked me in the eye and refused to help her own flesh and blood. She left us crying on Christmas. Please pray for my heart tonight. It is shattered. She had attached a photo of herself. It was a selfie taken in the kitchen. Her eyes red-rimmed, holding a tissue. The framing was perfect. She looked like a martyr. I scrolled through the comments. Susan Miller. That is awful. Mara, I always knew she was cold. Betty Higgins. Disgusting. Kids these days forget where they came from. Dylan Perry. She is a traitor. Don't worry, Mar. We don't need her. They were rewriting reality in real time. They were building a narrative where I was the villain, the greedy dragons sitting on a hoard of gold while the villagers starved. They didn't mention the gambling. They didn't mention the lies. They didn't mention the thousands of dollars I'd already sent. I felt a surge of nausea. This was not just a family spat anymore. This was a public relations campaign against my character. Then a new message popped up from a number I did not recognize. It was Dylan using a burner app or a friend's phone. Dylan, you blocked me. Nice. Smart move, but you cannot block the truth. I saw your company name on the screen. Summit Harbor Analytics. Fancy name. My blood ran cold. Dylan, I bet your boss would be interested to know that their VP is a heartless who lets her disabled brothers starve. I bet the local news in Denver would love a story about the secret millionaire scammer. Transfer $50,000 to my account by morning, or I start making calls. I will burn your reputation to the ground. Brenly, try me. I stared at the screen. The threat was explicit. He was going after my career. He was going to weaponize my success against me. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the folder. I sat there in the silence of the hotel room, the hum of the mini fridge the only sound. I needed to think. I needed to assess my exposure. Dylan was volatile, but he was also lazy. Would he actually call my company? Maybe. Desperation makes people industrious. I needed to secure everything. I logged into my bank accounts. I changed every password. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything, linking it to an authenticator app rather than my phone number, just in case he tried to SIM swap me. Then a thought struck me. It was a sharp, jagged memory from 6 months ago. I was back in Denver working late. Dylan had called me, sounding surprisingly lucid and professional. He had told me he was applying for a job as a security guard at a warehouse. He said the background check was rigorous. He said he needed to list a family member for a character reference, and they needed my full details to verify I was a real person. I just need your current address and your social. Bryn, it is just for the form. I really want this job. I had hesitated, but he had sounded so earnest, and it was just a job application. I wanted him to work. I wanted him to be independent, so I had given it to him. I felt a cold prickle of dread at the base of my neck. I'd opened a new tab on my browser. I went to the website of a major credit bureau. I had a credit monitoring service, but I rarely check the detailed report unless I was applying for lease. My score was always perfect. I logged in. I navigated to the open account section. I scanned the list. Mortgage, none. Car loan, none. Student loans paid off. Credit cards. There were 3 cards listed. The first was my primary American Express. The second was my backup Visa. The third was a Titanium Rewards MasterCard issued by a bank I did not bank with. I stopped breathing. I clicked on the details. Account opening date June 14th. That was 2 days after I gave Dylan my social security number. Credit limit $25,000. Current balance $24,842. Status past due. I looked at the transaction history. It was a map of Dylan's vices. DraftKings, $500. MGM Grand Detroit, $2,000. Best Buy, $3,000. Liquor World, $400. Cash advance, $5,000. He had stolen my identity. He had used the information I gave him to help him get a job, and he had used it to open a line of credit in my name. He had maxed it out in 6 months. And Mara. Surely Mara knew the card would have been mailed to her house. The statements were going to her address. I sat back against the headboard, feeling the physical sensation of a puzzle clicking into place, the BMW he wanted me to buy. It wasn't about a car. He needed cash to pay off the minimums on this card before it went to collections and alerted me. The furnace repair, the dental work. It was all a frantic attempt to service the debt he had echoed in my name. They weren't just asking for money. They were trying to cover up a felony. The sadness I had felt earlier evaporated. The lingering guilt of the bad daughter vanished. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This was not a family dispute. This was financial fraud. This was theft. I picked up my phone. It was 2:00 in the morning. I dialed the number on the back of my legitimate credit card to get to the Global Fraud Assistance line, knowing they could route me to the right bureau. Customer service, a computerized voice said. Fraud, I said clearly. A human came on the line. "Security Department, how can I help you?" "My name is Brinley Perry," I said. My voice was steady, devoid of emotion. "I have discovered a credit card account on my report that I did not open. I am a victim of identity theft." "I can help with that," the agent said. "Do you have any idea who might have opened the account?" I looked at the screenshot of Dylan's threat. I looked at Mara's Facebook post calling me a traitor. "Yes," I said. "I know exactly who opened it." "Okay, we will need to file a police report to dispute the charges fully," the agent advised. "Is that something you are willing to do?" "Yes," I said. "I am willing." I hung up 20 minutes later. The account was frozen. The investigation was opened, but I wasn't done. I looked at Dylan's threat again. "I will burn your reputation to the ground." He had declared war. He thought he was fighting a sister who would be too embarrassed to expose the family dirty laundry. He thought he was fighting the girl who used to hide in the library. He was wrong. He was fighting the CEO of Perry Ridge Ventures. And in my world, when someone threatens your assets and your reputation, you do not hide, you litigate. I opened a new search window. I did not search for family therapists in Milwaukee. I did not search for how to forgive toxic parents. I typed top defamation and fraud attorneys, Milwaukee aggressive. I scrolled past the family law mediators. I wasn't looking for mediation. I was looking for a sharp. I found a firm, Valkyrie Legal Group. Their website was black and gold. Their slogan was "We end conflicts permanently." I found the profile of a senior partner named Sarah Jenkins. Her bio said she specialized in high-stakes reputation management and complex financial fraud. I clicked on her email address. Subject: urgent representation, extortion, and identity theft. Brinley Perry. I began to type. "Dear MS. Jenkins, my name is Brinley Perry. I am a portfolio manager based in Denver with significant assets. I am currently in Milwaukee. I require immediate legal representation regarding a case of identity theft, extortion, and defamation involving immediate family members. I have a documented paper trail of blackmail threats involving my employer. I had evidence of a fraudulent credit line opened in my name with a balance of approximately $25,000. I am prepared to pursue criminal charges and civil restraining orders. I am not interested in settlement or reconciliation. I am interested in a scorched earth defense of my professional reputation. I have a retainer ready to be wired immediately. Please contact me as soon as your office opens." I hit send. I closed the laptop. I walked over to the window and looked out at the snowy parking lot. Somewhere out there in that cramped house, Dylan was probably sleeping, dreaming of the $50,000 he thought he could scare out of me. Marlo was probably checking her likes on Facebook, feeding on the sympathy of strangers. They thought the drama was over. They thought they had won the night. They had no idea that they had just handed me the weapon I needed to cut them out of my life forever. It wasn't money. It was the law. The conference room at Valkyrie Legal Group was the architectural opposite of my mother's living room, where her house was cramped, cluttered, and loud. This room was vast, minimalist, and silent. The table was a slab of black marble that felt cool to the touch. The view from the 30th floor looked down on the snowy streets of Milwaukee, reducing the people in the cars to insignificant specks. Sarah Jenkins walked in at 9:00 sharp. She did not look like a therapist. She did not look like a mediator. She looked like a weapon. She wore a charcoal suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life, and she carried a tablet like it was a shield. "Brinley," she said. She didn't smile. She shook my hand with a grip that was firm and dry. "I have reviewed the screenshots, the voicemails, and the credit report you forwarded. We have a lot to cover." She sat down and placed the tablet on the marble. "Let's define the battlefield," Sarah said, her voice crisp. "What your brother is doing has a legal name. Sabra. Actually, the demand for money accompanied by the threat to damage your reputation at your workplace. That is extortion. In Wisconsin, under Statute 943.30, that is a Class H felony." I nodded. Hearing a stranger put a criminal classification on my family dynamic was strangely validating. It wasn't just Dylan being Dylan. It was a felony. "The Facebook post," she continued, swiping on her screen. where your mother implies you have abandoned them and are hoarding wealth while they starve, knowing that you have been sending regular payments. That is defamation. Specifically, since she is publishing it to a third party and it harms your reputation, it is liable. And because she knows it is false, since we can prove the history of your transfers, we can argue actual malice. And the credit card? I asked. Identity theft, Sarah said flatly. Fraudulent use of a financial transaction card. Unauthorized use of personal identifying information. Another felony. He crossed a line. Brinley, he didn't just borrow your car. He stole your name. She looked at me. The strategy here is not emotional. It is structural. We are going to build a wall around you, and we are going to make it very expensive for them to try to climb it. Do it, I said. By noon, the first move had been made. Sarah's office drafted and dispatched formal cease and desist letters via courier to the house in the suburbs. The letters were not polite requests. They were legal grenades. They demanded the immediate removal of all social media posts referencing me. They demanded a permanent cessation of all communication, text, call, email, or third-party messages. They stated clearly that any further attempt to contact my employer would be met with an immediate lawsuit for damages. I spent the afternoon in the hotel room engaging in a different kind of warfare. I opened my laptop and went to work on the financial grid. I placed a freeze on my credit files at all three major bureaus: Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. I set up fraud alerts that would require a personal phone call to me before any new line of credit could be opened. I was locking the doors to the vault. Then I filed the official police report for the identity theft. I did it online through the Milwaukee Police Department's portal. I attached the credit card statement, the dates, and the address where the card was registered, my mother's house. I typed Dylan's name in the suspect field. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel a pang of sisterly regret. I felt the cold satisfaction of correcting a data error. By 4 in the afternoon, the courier had delivered the letters. I knew because the tone of the digital noise changed instantly. The public attacks stopped. I refreshed the Facebook page I was monitoring. Mara's post, the one with the crying selfie, and the accusations of betrayal vanished. The comments calling me a monster disappeared, but the private channels lit up. Dylan, realizing he could no longer post publicly without risking a lawsuit he couldn't afford, tried to pivot. He sent a text message. I had blocked his number, but my lawyer had advised me to keep a quarantine folder where blocked messages were routed but archived for evidence. I opened the folder. Dylan Jesus Bryn, a lawyer. Really, I was just venting. I didn't mean it. You know, I get hot-headed. I took the post down. Can we just talk? I am freaking out here. He wasn't sorry. He was cornered. He was using the hot-headed defense, the same one he had used since he was 10 years old. I didn't mean to break the window. I didn't mean to lose the grocery money. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot. Then Mara called. I let it go to voicemail. Then listened to the recording. Brimley, she wept. It was the full performance. A courier. You sent a courier to your mother's house. The neighbors saw you are treating us like criminals. You are tearing this family apart over money. It is just money. Brinley, we are your blood. I felt a surge of anger, but I pushed it down. I typed a response to her, not to engage, but to set the boundary for the record. Me, I am not tearing the family apart. I am protecting myself from theft and extortion. Family does not have the right to destroy me. Do not contact me again except through my attorney. I put the phone down. I felt hollowed out but steady. I was winning the legal chess match. I had the superior position. But the endgame was not just about silencing them. It was about understanding the board. And at 6:00 that evening, a new piece appeared that changed the entire game. My email chimed. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't a bank. The sender was Linder K. My Aunt Linder, the one who had stood in the living room and told me that family shares. I opened the email cautiously. The subject line was blank. The body of the email was short. Brinley, I don't know if I should send this. Rick told me to stay out of it. But after what happened last night, and seeing those lawyers involved, I just don't think it is right. You were always a good kid. You didn't deserve to be treated like a servant. I found this in my old files. I was the executive for your dad's estate initially before Mara took over. I thought you knew." Attached was a single image. It was a photograph of a document. The paper looked old, yellowed at the edges, sitting on a floral tablecloth. I zoomed in. It was a settlement statement from an insurance company, Midwest Mutual Indemnity. The date was from 26 years ago, 3 months after my father died. It detailed a payout for a workplace accidental death and dismemberment policy. I read the beneficiary line, Mara Perry. I read the distribution notes, funds intended for spousal support and the future educational and maintenance needs of the surviving children, Dylan Perry and Brinley Perry. Then I read the amount. My eyes refused to process it at first. I had to blink and look again. I had grown up believing we were destitute. I had grown up eating watered-down soup. I had grown up thinking we couldn't afford new shoes for school. The amount on the check was $350,000. $350,000 in the late nines adjusted for inflation. That was a fortune. That was a paid-off house. That was college funds. That was security. I sat there frozen. I did the math. I couldn't help it. My brain was wired for it. We had lived in poverty, real grinding poverty. Where had the money gone? I thought about the timeline. Dylan was 10 when Dad died. I was 8. 2 years later. We had no money. But Dylan always had things. He had the newest gaming consoles. He had dirt bikes that Uncle Rick gave him, which I now realized was a lie. He had brand-name sneakers while I wore canvas knockoffs. And Mara didn't work for the first 3 years after Dad died. She said she couldn't find a job, but she never seemed to panic until the money ran out. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. There was no poverty. Not really. There was just embezzlement. Mara had taken the insurance money meant for both of us, and she had funneled it entirely into Dylan and herself. She had spoiled him rotten for 5 years, burning through the cash, teaching him that money was infinite and unearned. And when the well ran dry, she had turned to me, the 8-year-old girl she had ignored, and demanded I become the servant to fix the mess she had made. And then she had kept the secret. She had watched me walk to school in the snow to save bus fare. Knowing she had spent my inheritance on Dylan's toys, I looked at the screen. The number $350,000 burned into my retinas. I pulled up my spreadsheet. I started a new tab. I listed the insurance payout. I listed the approximate total of the monthly transfers I had sent over the last 10 years, nearly $60,000. I listed the $25,000 on the stolen credit card. I looked at the sum. This wasn't just a dysfunctional family. This was a long con. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a resource they had temporarily lost control of and were trying to reacquire. The sadness was gone. The fear was gone. Even the anger was gone. What replaced it was a cold, crystalline determination. I picked up the phone and called Sarah Jenkins. It was late, but she picked up on the second ring. "Brinley," she asked, "is everything okay?" "No," I said, "but it is about to be clear." "What happened?" "I have new evidence." I said, "It turns out this isn't just about a credit card or a Facebook post. I just found out that my mother misappropriated my father's life insurance policy 20 years ago. She stole my childhood to fund my brother's addiction before it even started." Silence on the line, then the sound of a pen clicking. "Send me the document," Sarah said. Her voice had shifted. It was no longer just professional. It was predatory. "I am sending it now," I said. "This changes the complexion of the civil case." Sarah noted. "If we can prove she committed fraud as the executive of the estate, even if the statute of limitations is tricky, it establishes a pattern of financial abuse. We can use this to bury them." Brinley. "I don't just want to bury them," I said, looking at the yellowed paper on my screen. "I want to audit them. I want to expose every single lie they have told since 1999. "We can do that," Sarah said, "but it means going on the offensive. No more cease and desist. We file suit. We demand discovery. We subpoena their bank records to trace the flow of your monthly payments and the insurance money. We tear the house down to find the copper wiring." "Tear it down," I said. I hung up. I walked to the window. The city lights of Milwaukee were blurring in the distance. For years, I had thought I was the one who owed them. I thought I owed them for raising me, for feeding me, for sacrificing. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. They owed me. They owed me $350,000. They owed me a childhood. I went back to the laptop. I didn't open the portfolio dashboard. I didn't care about the $14 million right now. I opened the document Aunt Linder had sent. I forwarded it to Sarah. Then I opened a blank document. I began to write a statement for the court. I typed the header affidavit of Brinley Perry regarding the patent of systematic financial abuse and fraud. I typed the first sentence. My name is Brinley Perry, and for 26 years I have been the victim of a conspiracy disguised as a family. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was moving my queen, and I was going to take the whole board. The meeting was scheduled for 10:00 in the morning at a neutral location. I chose a rented conference suite in a shared workspace building in downtown Milwaukee. It was sterile, modern, and smelled of espresso and floor wax. It was a place where deals were made, not where families reconciled. That was the point. I arrived 30 minutes early with Sarah Jenkins. We sat on one side of the long frosted glass table. I was wearing a navy blazer and trousers, armor I had bought for board meetings. Sarah was reviewing a file folder that was 3 in thick. Remember, Sarah said, not looking up from her notes. You are not their daughter today. You are not their sister. You are the plaintiff. If they cry, you look at the facts. If they scream, you look at the facts. Emotion is their currency. Facts are yours. I am ready, I said. My hands were folded on the table. They were not shaking. Mara and Dylan arrived 5 minutes late. They walked in with an air of fragile confidence that almost made me sad. Mara was wearing her Sunday church dress and a heavy coat, her hair teased up high. Dylan was wearing a button-down shirt that was untucked, trying to look casual, but succeeding only in looking chaotic. They looked around the room, taking in the expensive chairs, the view of the skyline, the silence. They exchanged a look. I knew that look. They thought this was a surrender. They thought the lawyer was here to draft the settlement agreement. They thought they had won. Well, Mara said, pulling out a chair and sitting down with a heavy sigh. This is very fancy, Brinley. A bit unnecessary. Don't you think we could have just talked at the kitchen table? Dylan sat next to her, slouching. He didn't look at me. He looked at the bottle of water in the center of the table. Let's just get this over with, Dylan muttered. I have things to do. Good morning, Sarah said. Her voice was pleasant, but it had the temperature of liquid nitrogen. I am Sarah Jenkins, counsel for MS. Perry. This meeting is being recorded for legal purposes. Mara stiffened. Recorded. Why? To ensure clarity, Sarah said, and to prevent any future misunderstandings. Fine, Dylan waved a hand. Whatever. Just show us the numbers. How much are we talking? I looked at my brother. He really believed I was about to write him a check. He believed that the pressure of his threat, the threat to destroy my reputation, had worked. I picked up a single sheet of paper from the stack in front of me. I slid it across the glass. It stopped perfectly in front of Dylan. There are no checks today, I said. There are terms. Dylan frowned. He picked up the paper. Marlar leaned in to read over his shoulder. What is this? Mara asked, squinting. Options. What kind of options? I am offering you 3 paths forward, I said. Option A is the path of grace. Option B is the path of civil litigation. Option C is the path of criminal prosecution. Prosecution? Dylan's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Read it, I said. They read. I watched their eyes scan the page. I watched the color drain from Mara's face. I watched the vein in Dylan's neck begin to pulse. Option A, complete retraction of all defamatory statements, a formal written apology signed and notarized. A legally binding non-disclosure agreement preventing any discussion of Brinley Perry's finances or personal life. Dylan Perry enters a 60-day inpatient treatment program for gambling addiction. Brinley Perry will pay the facility directly. No cash will be transferred to family members. Option B, immediate filing of a civil lawsuit for defamation of character, seeking damages of $500,000. Filing for a permanent restraining order against both parties, full forensic audit of the late father's estate and insurance payouts. Option C, submission of evidence to the Milwaukee District Attorney regarding identity theft, credit card fraud, and wire fraud. Full cooperation with federal authorities regarding the fraudulent opening of financial accounts. The silence in the room stretched until it was thin enough to snap. Dylan threw the paper down. It fluttered to the floor. "You are joking," he said. His voice was trembling, but not with fear yet, with indignation. "Rehab. You think you can force me into rehab? I don't have a problem, Brinley. I have bad luck. You have a $25,000 debt on a credit card you opened in my name," I said calmly. "That is not bad luck, Dylan. That is a felony. I didn't steal anything," Dylan shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I borrowed your info. I was going to pay it back. Family helps family. You weren't using your credit anyway. So you admit you opened the account without my permission," Sarah interrupted, her pen hovering over her notepad. "I admit I needed help," Dylan yelled, looking at Mara for backup. "Tell her, Mom, tell her she's being crazy. She wants to send me to jail." Her own brother. Mara looked at the paper on the floor, then at me. Her eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit strategy. The narrative she had built, the one where I was the villain, was collapsing under the weight of legal terminology. "Brinley, honey," she started, her voice shaking. "Jail. You can't be serious. People don't send their family to jail. It is just a misunderstanding." Dylan was desperate. He wasn't thinking. He was thinking clearly enough to answer the security questions, I said. He was thinking clearly enough to figure a utility bill to verify the address. "That takes planning, Mom." "But he is sick," Morrow pleaded, tears finally spilling over. "If he is an addict, like you say, then he needs help, not prison. That is why Auction N exists." I said, "I am offering to pay for the help. $20,000 for a top-tier facility, but no cash for you, no cash for him. The money goes to the doctors." "I am not going to a shrink," Dylan spat. "I need capital. Brain, I need a stake. If you give me the 50 grand, I can pay off the card myself, and we can forget all this. Why are you making this so complicated?" I opened the thick folder. I pulled out the credit report. I pulled out the transaction log from the casino in Detroit. I pulled out the cease and desist letters because I am done being your bank, I said, and I am done being your victim. Then I pulled out the final document, the one Aunt Linder had sent me, the insurance settlement from 1999. I slid it toward Mara. "And I know about the $350,000, Mom." Mara froze. She looked at the document, and for the first time in my life, I saw her truly terrified. It wasn't the performance of fear she used to get money. It was the visceral fear of exposure. She stammered, "I don't know what that is." "It is the payout you got when Dad died." I said, "The money that was supposed to take care of 2 children. The money he told me didn't exist while I was taping my shoes together." Dylan looked at the paper. He looked at Mara. $350,000. Dylan whispered, "Mar, you had $300,000. Marlar's face twisted. She looked at Dylan, then at me, trapped between 2 lines. "It went to bills." She shrieked, defensiveness kicking in. "You don't know what it costs to run a house. I had debts. I had to protect you. You protected him," I said, pointing at Dylan. "You bought him dirt bikes. You bought him consoles. You taught him that money grows back if you cry loud enough. And when you ran out, you pointed him at me." "You lied to me," Dylan said, his voice dropping. He turned on Mara. "The alliance was fracturing. You told me we were broke. You told me the reason I couldn't go to the hockey camp was because we were broke. But you had the money. I spent it on you." Mara screamed at him, losing control. "I gave you everything. Dylan, who do you think paid your bail when you got arrested at 19? Who do you think paid off that bookie in Chicago? Me. I spent every dime on your messes." "You said that was a loan from Grandma," Dylan yelled back. "I lied." Mara shouted, "I lied to protect you because you are weak." The room fell silent. Mara covered her mouth, realizing what she had just said. Dylan stared at her. The golden boy illusion dissolved. She had just called him weak in front of the sister he despised. "He is weak," I said softly, "because you crippled him." "I hate you," Dylan whispered, looking at me. His eyes were red, wild. I hate you. You think you are so smart with your lawyers and your files. You are just a cold-hearted maybe, I said, but I am a solvent one. I have leverage too. Dylan sneered. A nasty smile crept onto his face. He pulled out his phone. You think you can bully me? I have photos. Bryn, remember when you were a teenager? Remember that diary you kept? I found it. I kept it. I have stories about you that would make your corporate friends vomit. I will post them. I will send them to every client on your list. It was a bluff. Or maybe it wasn't. It didn't matter. Sarah Jenkins leaned forward. She didn't raise her voice. Mr. Perry, she said, I would advise you to be very careful. You just attempted to blackmail my client in a recorded settlement meeting. That is a separate felony count of extortion. And since we are in Wisconsin, a one-party consent state for recording, this entire conversation is admissible in court. Dylan's thumb hovered over his phone screen. He looked at Sarah. He looked at the recorder on the table. You are bluffing, he said. Try me, I said. I echoed the words he had sent me in the text. Post it. See what happens to your probation status. Suddenly, there was a knock on the glass door. We all turned. Standing outside was Aunt Linda. I had asked her to come. I hadn't told her why, only that I needed a witness who wasn't a lawyer. Sarah opened the door. Linda walked in. She looked small, clutching her purse. She looked at Mara, who was weeping into a tissue, and Dylan, who was vibrating with rage. Linda, Marler said, looking up with hope. Linda, tell her. Tell her she is being cruel. Tell her family doesn't do this. Linda stood by the door. She looked at me. She looked at the $14 million sister who had brought the prime red. I can't do that, Mara, Linda said quietly. But, Mara gasped. We knew, Linda said. Her voice was shaky but clear. We all knew Dylan was stealing from her. We knew about the credit cards. We knew about the fake emergencies. You traitor, Mara hissed. We didn't say anything because we were afraid of you, Mara. Linda continued. We were afraid of the screaming, but it wasn't right. What you did with that insurance money, leaving Brinley with nothing, it was a sin. And what Dylan is doing now, it is a crime. Linda looked at Dylan. She is giving you a way out. Dylan, take the rehab. It is more than you deserve. Dylan looked at the three women in the room. His mother, who had used him, his aunt, who pied him, and his sister, who had outgrown him. He slumped back in his chair. The fight went out of him. He wasn't a monster anymore. He was just a 36-year-old man in a tight jersey who owed too much money to too many people. If I go to rehab, Dylan muttered, staring at the table. Does the debt go away? I will pay off the $25,000 credit card balance, I said. I will not press charges for identity theft, but you sign the confession. If you leave the facility early or if you contact me again, the deal is void, and I file the police report immediately. Dylan looked at Mar. She didn't look back. She was staring at the wall, lost in the wreckage of her own exposure. Fine, Dylan said. Give me the pen. Sarah slid the document across the table. He sighed. He didn't read the fine print. He just sighed. Then Mara sighed. She did it aggressively, scratching her name into the paper as if the ink was a weapon. I hope you are happy, Marler said, tossing the pen back at me. You have your piece of paper. You have your victory. You are a millionaire, Brinley, but you are an orphan now. Do you understand that you have no one? I picked up the documents. I checked the signatures. I placed them neatly into my folder. I stood up. I have been an orphan since I was 8 years old. Mom, I said, I just finally stopped paying for the privilege of pretending I wasn't. I looked at Dylan one last time. The car will be here in an hour to take you to the facility. I said, don't miss it. I turned to the door. You owe us. Dylan shouted after me. A last-week attempt to reclaim power. You still owe us. We are your blood. I stopped at the door. I didn't turn around. I don't need my family to pay me back. Dylan, I said, my voice steady and loud enough for the microphone to catch. I just need my family to stop destroying me. I walked out of the room, past Aunt Linda, past the glass walls and into the hallway. I pressed the button for the elevator. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, cutting off the side of the conference room, I didn't feel lonely. I felt lighter, £14 million later. The machinery of the law is slow until it isn't. Then it moves with the crushing weight of a freight train. 2 days after the meeting in the conference room, the credit bureau completed their preliminary investigation. They did not care about family dynamics. They did not care about my mother's tears or my brother's bad luck. They cared about data. They flagged the account ending in 4092 as confirmed fraudulent activity. The bank immediately opened a formal criminal investigation. I was back in Denver by then, sitting in my office at Summit Harbor Analytics when my phone rang. It was not Mara. It was not Dylan. It was a fraud investigator named Detective Miller from the Milwaukee Police Department. MS. Pairing. He said, "We have received the file from the bank. Based on the amount over $24,000 and the interstate nature of the transaction history, this is a significant case. We have called Mr. Dylan Perry in for questioning." I felt a phantom ache in my chest, the last vestige of the sister I used to be. Did he go? He did. Miller said he claimed it was a misunderstanding. He claimed you authorized it verbally, but then we showed him the IP address logs from the application date, which matched his mobile device, and your affidavit stating you had no knowledge of the account. He stopped talking after that. The settlement agreement I had signed with Dylan was a civil contract. It did not stop the bank from pursuing their money, and since I had refused to pay the debt, the bank was coming for the person who stole it. I thought that was the end of it. I thought reality had finally breached the walls of their delusion. I was wrong. Desperation is a powerful hallucinogen. 3 days later, I was in the middle of a strategy meeting with the VP of Product. We were discussing a new integration for our risk assessment tool. The glass walls of our conference room looked out over the lobby of the Summit Harbor building. It was a secure building requiring a badge to get past the turnstiles. I saw a commotion near the front desk. I saw a security guard step forward. I saw a woman in a heavy mismatched coat waving her arms. My blood ran cold. It was Mara. She had flown to Denver. She had found my office. She was here to do the one thing she knew how to do, make a scene until someone paid her to stop. I am her mother. I heard her scream through the glass, her voice muffled but distinct. She is up there. She is hiding from me. Tell her to come down. She is letting them arrest her brother. My colleagues turned to look. The VP of Product raised an eyebrow. "Is that for you?" I stood up. My face burned, not with shame, but with a white-hot fury. She had crossed the final line. She had brought her chaos into my sanctuary. I walked to the railing of the mezzanine. I looked down. Mara looked up and saw me. Her face twisted into a mask of tragic victory. "Brinley," she shrieked, pointing at me. "Brinley, how could you? He is in a holding cell. My baby is in a holding cell because of you. You have millions. You could have fixed it with a signature." The lobby fell silent. Couriers, receptionists, and clients stared. I did not go down. I did not engage. I looked at the head of security, a man named Marcus, who I greeted every morning. I nodded once. Marcus stepped in front of her. "Ma'am, you are trespassing. You need to leave the premises immediately or we will contact the Denver police." "I am not leaving until she speaks to me," Mara yelled, grabbing the turnstile. "She is an ungrateful, cold-hearted witch. She stole my retirement. She owes me." Marcus didn't argue. He signaled 2 other guards. They took her by the arms firmly but professionally and escorted her toward the revolving doors. "Brinley," she screamed as they dragged her out. "You are dead to me. Do you hear me? You are dead to me." I watched her disappear onto the snowy sidewalk. I turned back to the conference room. My team was staring at me. "I apologize for the disruption," I said, my voice steady, though my hands were clenched into fists under the table. "That was a legal matter involving a harassment case. It has been handled. Shall we continue with the risk assessment?" They nodded slowly, but I knew the story would spread. However, Mara's stunt gave me the final piece of ammunition I needed. The hearing for the permanent restraining order was scheduled for the following week. Because of the interstate nature of the harassment and the cyberstalking elements, my lawyer Sarah had managed to get an emergency expedited hearing via video conference with the court in Milwaukee. I sat in a conference room in Denver. Dylan and Mara sat in a courtroom in Wisconsin. Dylan looked terrible. He was out on bail, presumably paid for by Morrow pawning whatever was left of the family heirlooms. He looked shrunken, his eyes darting around the room. Mara sat next to him, clutching a rosary. "Your Honor," Sarah began, "we are seeking a permanent order of protection for MS. Perry against both defendants. We have established a clear pattern of financial fraud, identity theft, extortion via digital channels, and now physical harassment at the plaintiff's place of employment." Dillon's public defender stood up. "Your Honor, my client is under extreme psychological duress. He is battling addiction." The texts were not genuine threats of violence. They were cries for help. "This is a family dispute that has spiraled out of control because the sister refuses to communicate." "Refuses to communicate?" Sarah countered. "She communicated by paying his bills for 10 years. She communicated by offering to pay for his rehab. The defendants responded by stealing her identity and showing up at her office to scream at her." The judge, a stern woman with gray hair, looked at Dillon. "Mr. Perry, did you or did you not demand $50,000 in exchange for not contacting your sister's employer?" I was angry," Dillon stammered. "She has so much." "Judge, you don't understand. She has $14 million. She showed us, and she wouldn't give me 1% to save my life." "The plaintiff's assets are irrelevant to your actions," the judge said sharply. "It is not irrelevant," Mara blurted out. The courtroom froze. Mara stood up, ignoring her lawyer's hand on her arm. "It is not irrelevant," she repeated, her voice shaking with righteous indignation. "That money belongs to the family. I raised her. I fed her when her father died. I kept a roof over her head. If she has $14 million, she has a moral obligation to help her brother. It is sick that she is hoarding it while we suffer. Any good daughter would share." There it was, the confession. She wasn't denying the extortion. She was justifying it. She truly believed that my success was her property. She believed that my bank account was simply a ledger she hadn't yet balanced against the debt of my existence. The judge stared at Mara over the rim of her glasses. "Ma'am," the judge said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register, "you just admitted on the record that your motivation for these actions was to access the plaintiff's funds against her will. That is the definition of predatory behavior." "It is family," Mara cried. "No," the judge said. "It is harassment, and it ends today." The gavel came down. The order was granted. Permanent, no contact, 500 yards, no third-party communication, no social media posts. If they violated it, they would go to jail immediately. The screen went black. But there was one loose end. I had told Sarah to arrange a final brief phone call with Dillon's lawyer present just to close the loop on the rehab offer. It was the last shred of humanity I had left for them. The call was connected 5 minutes later. "Dillon," I said into the speakerphone, "the restraining order is in effect, but my offer for rehab stands. I have deposited the funds into an escrow account. If you check yourself in today, the treatment is paid for. If you complete the program, I will consider not testifying at your fraud trial. That is the only help you will ever get from me again." I waited. I heard him breathing on the other end. "You think you are a saint, don't you?" Dillon said. His voice was filled with venom. "You think because you have money, you can dictate my life. You think you can control me?" "I am trying to save you from prison, Dillon," I said. "I don't want your charity," he spat, "and I don't need your rehab. I will beat this case and I will make my own money. I don't need you." "Okay," I said, "that is your choice." "Who do you think you are?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "Just because you got lucky with some stocks, who do you think you are to look down on us?" I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the office window. I saw the woman who had taped her shoes together. I saw the woman who had eaten ramen for 4 years. I saw the woman who had built an empire in the dark while they slept. "I am not lucky, Dillon," I said quietly, "and I am not your sister anymore. I am Brinley Perry. I am me for the first time." I hung up the phone. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. The silence in the room wasn't empty. It was full. It was full of possibility. I walked out of the conference room and down the hall to my office. I sat in my ergonomic chair. I looked at the dual monitors. The market was open. The numbers were moving. The ticker for the Japanese robotics firm was up another 2%. I opened my personal calendar. The date was December 26th. I looked at the entry for next Christmas. It was blank. I opened my digital journal. I scrolled past the entries about asset allocation and risk management. I went to the bottom of the page. I typed one sentence. It wasn't a financial goal. It wasn't a projection. It was a new law of physics for my universe. From today, no one is allowed to turn my success into their debt. I closed the laptop. The screen went dark, but the light in the room remained. Thank you so much for listening to Brinley's story. I hope her journey of breaking free resonates with you. Please comment down below where you are listening from. I love seeing our community grow across the world. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to Azad Revenge Stories. Like this video and hit that hype button to help more people hear this story. See you in the next one. Thanks to all.